Washington, but about the news today as well with John Bolton. And so if we have that sound, we'll bring it in just a moment, but you can bring in our guest.
Yeah, we caught some of the tail end of what he was saying about John Bolton. He said he's, quote, not a smart guy and, quote, could be unpatriotic. President Trump said he knows nothing about the raid at his house early this morning, saying he expects to be briefed by DOJ later today. I'm told we do have a little bit of the sound of what he said earlier. Let's go ahead and play that real quick.
Mr. President, have you been briefed on the FBI raid of John Bolton?
No, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife. When I hired him, he served a good purpose because, as you know, he was one of the people that forced Bush to do the ridiculous bombings in the Middle East. Bolton, he wants to always kill people, and he's very bad at what he does. But he worked out great for me because every time he doesn't talk, he's like a very quiet person, except on television. If he could say something bad about Trump, he'll always do that. But he really doesn't talk. He's quiet. And I'd walk into a room with him with a foreign country, and the foreign country would give me everything because they said, oh no, they're going to get blown up because John Bolton's there. He's not a smart guy, but he could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out. I know nothing about it. I just saw it this morning. They did a raid.
All right, we are joined now by Fox News contributor Hugh Hewitt. Hugh, you just had a chance to hear the president's comments there. Give us your top-line thoughts.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Dana. John Bolton is a very, very good lawyer. He ran the Department of Justice Civil Division under President Reagan. He's known by most people as a Hawk's Hawk. President Trump referred to the utility of having a Hawk's Hawk on the staff, but obviously those men do not like each other. Here's the key takeaway. President Trump was not informed of, did not approve, did not in any way initiate the raid at John Bolton's house. Now, given that he's a very good lawyer, I will be shocked if he had classified documents there. I would be less shocked if there is some sort of Foreign Agent Registration Act violation being alleged. But we don't know. It's all speculation, and I'm glad to hear the president had nothing to do with authorizing the raid.
I think, Hugh, that's, well, yes, I agree. Although I do think that there are going to be questions about weaponization. That's going to be inevitable. And I was mentioning to Byron York in the first hour of America's Newsroom that way back when, in my previous life, we were the spokespeople trying to get John Bolton approved to be UN ambassador. And we were going to have to go to recess appointments, and the DC media absolutely could not stand him. And he's had quite a life in Washington, D.C. This has got to be probably very difficult for him to handle. Maybe he anticipated it. He told John and Carl just 2 weeks, about 12 days ago, that he did think he was on a retribution list. So this will be part of the narrative as well.
Well, the ambassador has been my friend, full disclosure, for more than 20 years. And his book about the UN, incredibly detailed during his service under George W. Bush. He has a photographic memory for details. He is extraordinarily verbal on television and is a great guest, obviously. I would be shocked if he did what Biden did, sloppily collected and improperly stored classified documents. I know he submitted his first book for clearance to the agencies, the federal process for clearance. I don't know if he did it for the second book, but we will see. I don't know. No one knows. What I really am relieved is that President Trump did not know and did not authorize this. Whether or not Director Patel and Attorney General Bondi had motives in addition to the law, I doubt that. I really do. They don't want to lose this case. They don't want to have the indictment unsealed and see that there's no predicate for it, or not the indictment, the search warrant unsealed and have no predicate for it. So I think everyone ought to best just wait and see, but I do remind everyone, a guy who ran the civil division is not just a national security expert, he's a hell of a lawyer, and people got to remember that.
Hugh, we were talking about this in the last hour. In 2023, FBI Director Kash Patel wrote a book. It was called Government Gangsters, and at the end of that book, he put together a list of the top people he felt were in the deep state and, quote, threats to democracy, and he put John Bolton on that list. So as we wait for the underlying case to go public and find out what they're looking for here, obviously everything is looked at through a political spectrum these days. What do you think about the optics of what's happening this morning?
They're bad. And that's why I don't think it's a political case. Because if you were trying to improve the president's standing with the public, you would not do this. You'd wave it off. You would get John Bolton would get the Biden treatment. So I really doubt that it's a political matter. I do believe that if you set a standard with a highly visible individual, that we are really going to crack down in the way that the DOJ cracked down on President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. That we're going to do a letter of the law, stringent application of the law on classified documents or foreign agent registration. This would be the kind of thing that would get the attention of literally everyone inside the Beltway to go back and make sure they haven't got anything in their files that ought not to be there. I just can't believe anyone at Justice or the FBI is motivated by politics when it comes to John Bolton, because it's such bad optics.
Hugh Hewitt, thank you so much. We appreciate that. We have breaking news on that, and we also have more other breaking news that has just happened here in New York City.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.